Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. Now, it's been quite a wet month in March compared to how dry February was. February was a really cold month, whereas March has been much milder. All we have is much sun. Despite the mildness, we haven't seen too much sun. We get little bits and glimpses of it, but nothing too much. And the sun really starts to warm the soil up once we do get it out. So as we approach the end of March now, hopefully we'll start to see a bit more sunshine. And that will also help pull the plants up and out of the ground. Now, in today's video, we shall put some bits and pieces in that myself and Mrs. W have been doing throughout the month of March that didn't make it onto a dedicated film. Also, for those of you that want to sow and grow along with us, we shall be sowing our celeriac and celery seeds. Today we want to look to plant our potatoes. Now, what we are going to be doing this year is to be planting all of our first earlies and second earlies into these buckets. And really the main reason for that is not because I'm unhappy growing them in the ground. I've yet to get a harvest from a bucket that I would normally get from the ground. I have to say that. And I know there are a lot of videos out there on YouTube that will tell you different, but we haven't experienced the same kind of yields in the buckets as we do in the ground. However, with this cost of living crisis that's going on, there are other things that we can be growing in our plots that cost much more money than potatoes. And our potatoes are now finished now, the ones that we had in storage, so we needed to buy some from a local farm shop, some Maris Piper. And yeah, so really they're still relatively cheap. Whereas if you want to go and buy some purple sprouting broccoli, for example, that we have in our garden at the moment, you know, you get about 5 stems of that for nearly £3 now. So it's just trying to balance out what grows best for the value of that crop in our beds. And of course, potatoes take up lots of space. No two ways about that. Whatever you say, they take up lots of space. Now, we'll put some compost in the bottom, and I've got the potatoes. We talked about chitting them, and you can see here how they've chitted. So they're not long, dangly white stems. They are short, stubby, green to purpley stems. These have been in our spare bedroom since, when did we start doing these? Must have been mid-February, was it? Yes, it was mid-February. So today is actually the 18th of March. Here in the UK, Mothering Sunday tomorrow. So Mrs. W's looking forward to that. The other thing I'd actually particularly like about the growing them in the buckets is that you don't have to worry so much about harvesting them. You can just put the buckets somewhere where it's frost free and can harvest them as and when you want them. So I really do like that aspect of it. We're going to try and embrace, as I say, growing our first and second earlies in these buckets. One of those occasions, Mrs. W, I don't have to worry about plot 2, bed 1, 2 and 3 because it's in the whole of plot 2.
Yeah.
And if you are planting yours in the ground, by the way, they want to be about 5 inches deep. What I normally do is to get my trowel, put the trowel in, and the depth of that trowel up to the handle is the depth that I actually plant our potatoes into the ground. And if you want to see how we do that, we did make a video last year on planting our potatoes, so do go back and watch that if you haven't seen it, and it will show you exactly how we grew our potatoes in our No Dig garden.
Hello.
Hello. What are we doing today?
Well, I'm just pricking out a few of the little gem lettuce
Oh yeah.
that we sowed last week. Was it last week or was it the week before?
Yeah, no, it was last week.
It was last week, yeah. They came through really quickly, didn't they? So
Yeah.
they've quite quickly got a bit leggy, so I'm burying them quite
Nice
deep.
and
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Just easing them out.
Now you may wonder why we're using a plastic tray here. Well, the fact of the matter is that, you know,
Look at that.
before... Well, what have we got there?
Look at the root on that. Can you see it?
Yes, that is...
The
Oh,
root
yes.
is longer than the stem.
Amazing. Yeah, going back to the plastic tray, clearly before we started buying the plastic modules that we use now, we obviously had these old plastic trays and we don't like to just throw them away unless we really have to. So we're making use of them while we still can. I want to sow our first row of carrots today. This year we are sowing a variety called Amsterdam Maxi. We sowed a variety called Little Finger last year, if you remember. And we liked those. We liked the shape of them, the way they grew. They didn't keep terribly long, did they, Mrs. W?
No.
They weren't very good keepers. So that's why, one of the reasons why we're trying a different variety this year for our carrots. So today I'm going to sow a variety of Amsterdam Maxi, these are called. And it's a nonce type carrot, so it's not going to get too long, it's not going to get too fat. A nice, hopefully straight cylindrical carrot. And then I'm going to sow then a row of our old favourite Norwich. Norwich do get a little deeper and a little bigger. They don't get really big like our Eskimo do, but you know, they will get that a little bit bigger. You don't want to be sowing your carrots and indeed parsnips if it's blowing a hoolie. You know, if the winds really are really strong, you know, it'll blow the seed about, so just delay doing that. The other thing is you want to wait until the weather has got a bit more milder, so for argument's sake, if you're growing your crops up there in the north and in Scotland, you may want to sow your carrots into April and not March, as we can get away with down here. Now, as usual, you just need to try and do your utmost best to sow them as thinly as possible. It's not the easiest job in the world, and it takes quite a lot of practice. But of course, inevitably, you're going to have to thin them. Now what we're going to do is to move the line on 6 inches. We leave around 6 inches between our rows of carrots. One of the reasons we can get away with that is because we are no dig and we, see less weeds. I thought we'd just show you the peppers and the chilies that we attempted to overwinter last year. These, as you can see, looking really quite good. We have, bizarrely enough, 5 of the pepper plants left and 5 of the chili plants. We had a couple of casualties along the way. You may well have found that you had the same thing if you did the same thing as us. Do let us know. But now is the time when these plants need waking up from their overwintering sleep, and you want to begin watering them. They don't ever need to be absolutely soaking wet. They just need a light watering so their roots can start getting used to taking in water and nutrients. Now, the other thing that we did do, just to hedge our bets, was to sow some self-save seed from last year. And you can see they've germinated really well, and I have to say, being self-save seed, they really, really did germinate. When we bought the seed for these plants that we overwintered last year, we seemed to wait an eternity for them to germinate and to get going. But with our self-saved seed, they seem to have come out of the traps really quite quickly. And I think it really does say a lot about saving your seed, which is why we intend to do a lot more of it this year, as we said in an earlier video, and we'll keep featuring that and coming back to that as the weeks and months roll by. But yes, if you did follow us and attempted to overwinter your pepper and chili plants, do start to give them a light watering now. The idea is to start doing this about a month and a half before they go back into their final growing positions. And ours won't go out into our greenhouse until sometime toward the end of April, early May, depending on what the frost situation is like by the time we get to that time of year. So it's about the right time. I put our main crop potatoes into the ground. A little earlier today we did the first earlies, which are in the tubs. I've now moved on to putting the main crops in, and once again we should be doing Maris Piper, and we had 1 or 2 potatoes left over. You can see there are some really nice chits on them, and these really just have been in our spare bedroom with natural light from the window, so that you don't get those horrible spindly white shoots. And had 1 or 2 people say to me that they were quite surprised when I said that in the jobs for the month back in February, and thought they should be in the dark. No, they don't want to be in the dark. It's the dark and them searching for the light that produces those white stems. What we want is nice green to purpley red ones that are producing themselves, and only by putting them in a light and frost-free place, because that's also important. These get frosted, they're not going to be a lot of good to you. So spare bedroom, or a windowsill in the house, or in the conservatory, really, really good. We managed to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows into plot 2, and there are 8 in the row. So that's quite a fair amount of potatoes. And I don't think I said when we were planting, when you watched me planting them in the buckets the other day, but this is about right for what you're seeing for the potatoes. What you don't want is to have, 6, 7, 8 of these shoots all sticking out. And if you ever do find yourself in that situation, just reduce them down to, well, I always reduce them down to no more than 4. They will grow and you'll get potatoes, so don't think if you miss it that you're not going to get potatoes. But what you won't get is so many big ones. You're going to get more smaller ones, because there are more stems coming out of there to be able to grow potatoes on. And all you have to do is to do that, and the stem is gone. Now, back in the greenhouse now, and it is time to sow our celeriac. And also today we're going to be sowing our celery. And you can see that, Mrs. W is just tampering down the peat-free compost that we have put into these containers. And actually, these were the containers that had the brassicas in, and because they've all now been potted on and indeed planted out into our plots, they've become free again, ready to sow these seeds. What are we going to sow first, Mrs. W?
Well, we're going with the Celeriac Prins. Such tiny seeds that apparently there are 250 in that small little patch there. So we're going to try to sow them sparingly, I think is the word.
Now, celeriac need a long growing season, and indeed the first 3 months of their life really are going to be inside here, the greenhouse or the polytunnel when they get moved over there. They will get potted on, but not for some time as yet. And a lot like their cousins celery, yeah, they're in these containers for quite some time. And it could take up to 3 weeks for them to germinate, so don't worry if you don't see anything after 2 or 3 days. The other thing is that they don't need a huge covering of compost. The seeds are so tiny. That is about as much as you need. The label, of course. Now, some people they will put a piece of glass over the top to make like a mini propagator to help them germinate. These will actually go down into our house. We don't do that. We just take them down into the house and they sit on a windowsill until they germinate. If it looks like we're going to get some really, really mild days and nights throughout the following months, April and into May, then they come out here and into the greenhouse.
And as the same as with the celeriac, the seeds for the celery are again very tiny. Quite difficult to see in my hand because my hands are so dirty. Same principle. I mean, you can hardly see them. They look like little. They're not even as big as a salt grain, I don't think. Just put those last few that I'd got out. There we go.
Now, this is our first sowing of celery. We do 2 sowings. We do one now and we do another in May. And then, just like the celeriac, just a light covering of compost is needed. Now, you can sow both celeriac and celery anytime now. In fact, from mid-March through to mid-April is a good time to sow. Clearly, depending on when you sow it, in those 4 weeks will depend on when you begin your harvest. And that's the celeriac and the celery sown. Now, it's a weekend when we're filming this, so you won't actually see this video probably until Wednesday or Thursday of the following week. But don't worry about that. As I said, when we're in the greenhouse sowing the seeds, there is a really long window between mid-March and mid-April. I would have probably looked to sow the celery seeds and the celeriac seeds this coming weekend, so the following weekend from this one. But of course we need to film things just a little in advance so that it goes out at the right time that you guys can also sow your seeds. Now, next weekend is the last weekend of March, and of course that weekend the clocks will spring forward. And then things really will start to get motoring because they start to get extra light. So here in the UK, the lights are switched off in the sky around about 10 past, quarter past 6 now. But next Sunday, 7 days from now, it'll be 7:15, and they will only keep getting longer and longer until we get to the equinox in mid-June. So yeah, things are about to really start to take off. Between now and then we have one more seed to sow, and that is our cucumbers. We find for us that works best to sow them towards the end of March and not at the beginning of March, as I know some people do. We saw the overwintered chilies and peppers down in our house, in our kitchen. That was where they are at the moment. And we also show you the seeds, which are now young seedlings, that we sowed also right at the beginning of the month of March. And we really wanted to sow those because we wanted to hedge our bets, just in case those plants didn't make it, or indeed if we get them out here and they don't make it, then we've got some backup. And also, we've also got friends and family that want some anyway. But one thing that Mrs. W did say to me, which I thought was a really great idea, if we also take a couple of those plants from the seed that we sowed this year and put them inside the greenhouse and the polytunnel along with the other peppers and chilies, we'll have a comparison as to, do we get a slightly earlier harvest? Do we get more fruit? And ultimately, was it worth it? If you want to know the answer to that, and you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, then please do so. We would love to have you on board. But also importantly, don't forget to turn on those notifications so that you are informed whenever we upload a video. Now, do leave us your comments. We love to get your comments. And let us know what you've been sowing during the month of March. Let us know what you've planted out. And yeah, we'll do our best to answer those as soon as possible. We do love to hear from you. We shall see you next time.